Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Peace and blessings upon you all. Dear research scholars, basically this video is for research scholars. I'm myself a research scholar from Emic University, and basically I'm doing a video here about different research philosophies. I just asked many people about the research philosophies and what are the stances, and they hardly know about the things. So I thought, why not to make a video for that? Okay, so we're gonna learn about different research philosophies. We will talk about research onion, then epistemology, ontology, axiology, phenomenology, positivism, interpretivism, realism, relativism, and many more. Okay, and my email ID is juni@live.in. You can contact me if you have questions, and hopefully we may work together. Maybe I may be missing something out. You may suggest something or so on. Okay, like I said, before doing our research and working on it, we have to understand what's called as the research onion. Basically, this research onion has many layers. Okay, and we're going to peel each layer and eat actually every layer. Actually, we had to peel it layer by layer and eat them and understand them actually in a proper way, so that we understand where we are going. For example, if we see this research onion, we have the first thing is the research philosophies. There are many kind of research philosophies, as you can see: positivism, realism, interpretivism. What kind of these things are subjectivism or objectivism, and there are a lot of things we will talk about it. That will be the focus of this lecture actually. Okay, then there's another layer, for example, which is about the research approaches, and then there are the research strategies, then choices, then there are the time horizons. Okay, and will it be cross-sectional or longitudinal research? And then the last thing which you're going to do actually is the techniques and procedures for data collection and analysis. And when you are doing a research, you have to understand each of these layers in a proper way and understand where your research stands according to these, and then and only then you can actually do your research in a proper systematic way. Okay, but before dealing with these kind of layers, actually today we're going to deal with the top layer, but before that we're going to zoom out and just talk about the philosophy and just its thematic types, which will have a kind of sub types of these philosophies as its subtypes. So when we talk about the research philosophy, okay, the term research philosophy relates to the development of knowledge and the nature of that knowledge. That's important. Not only the knowledge, but the nature of that knowledge. So the research philosophy contains important assumptions about the way in which actually you view the world. So there are three, thematic or three major ways of thinking about research philosophy. That is your ontology, okay, and epistemology and axiology. And these three actually have they contain important differences which will influence the way in which you think about the research process as a whole. So let's talk about now the first thing, that's the ontology. Now it's a Greek word which actually means nature of being, or what you call study of being. Okay, so ontology, study of being here. It's about the realism. Okay, so what is the realism? It's about the existence, it's about the reality, it's about the essence. So realism primarily informed by an ontological question which says what exists in social reality. It basically switches from the focus upon knowledge to a focus upon what exists. We're not talking about the knowledge, we're talking about what actually exists. So realism actually argues the knowledge about the world has already been created, and what you got to do is you need to ask what must be the world be like. Okay. Now, if we see that this ontology is of actually three kinds. One is the objective ontology, then we got the subjective ontology, and we got the constructive ontology. Objective ontology says that social reality is pre-existing. Okay, it's already there. This is what objective ontology means. And subjective ontology basically means social reality depends on the subject making the observation. It's more about the world which you see, okay, which you perceive, which a subject perceives. And constructive ontology is kind of a mix-up between the objective and subjective ontology, okay, which means that social reality is worked at and created by the people. So constructive ontology says social reality is worked at and created by the people. So it's kind of midway between the objective and subjective ontologies. So now let's talk in depth about these actually ontological perspectives. The first is the objectivism, okay, or the objective ontology, which we just talked about, that which says that social reality is pre-existing. What does that mean? Actually, is this portrays the position that social entities exist in reality external to social actors. So let's give an example to understand this thing. Say, for example, we want to see the role of management in some ABC company. Okay, this is my ABC company, and I want to see the role of management in this company. This is my research. So what will be my ontological position? What are the players? And we try to see what is my maybe my ontological position is that of the objectivist. Okay. So let's try to understand what I was talking about. Firstly, we have to see if in the role of the management, we have the players. They are the managers. Okay. Now what we do is we try to change all the managers, okay, in the company, in order to see the improvement and the vigor and all those things. But we got to keep one thing in the mind before we deal this thing, is that what objectivism means is it portrays the position that social entities exist in reality external to social actors. Okay, so what is my reality? That is the role of management. Okay, who are the social actors? They are the managers. Okay, now we may say that management is an objective entity. Okay, so we may have the objectivist stance, because my reality is that that the management which actually holds the key for the company. Now in the company, these managers have their job descriptions, the duties, operating procedures, which they have to adhere with. Now, because managers are external players, and management is actually the reality in the organization. So, because if you what we are arguing, that if we change the managers, maybe they are more qualified or something, and all those things, they have all kind of qualities, maybe new managers, but the management which a company has is its reality, okay, and it's not going to change. If it's not going to change, then changing the managers, because if we get the new managers, now what they're going to follow? They're going to follow the same management principles. Now, in a nutshell, what I'm saying is that you may argue that if you have a managers which are maybe different in their approaches, in their marketing, in other things, may actually change the management. But we are actually missing the point, because the management in that ABC organization has a reality that is separate from the managers that inhibit the reality. So this is the point in the objective ontology or objectivist or objectivism point of view perspective, which says that your external actors, okay, they are separate from the reality that exists in a social entity. Let's talk about another example. Say, for example, in a customer service of this ABC company. And objectivist says that the customer service in an organization has a reality that is separate from the customers that receive that reality. Okay? But if you talk about the subjectivism and subjectivist view, the subjectivist says that it is the external players who actually create the reality. Social reality is depends on the subjects making the observation. So we are more on the so in the customer service, we are about the customers. We think our reality is being constructed by the what constructivism actually more enhances. Our reality is being created by the external entities itself. So subjectivist view is that customer service is produced through the social interaction between service providers and the customers, and it's continually being revised, changing. It is dynamic. So you are building your customer services quality, more evolving as per the customers interact with you. As per the nature of the customers, you are evolving it. So what does that mean? The reality, there is no definitive entity called a customer service in your company ABC. But if you fix your company's customer service, you may have a definitive entity called a customer services that's not going to change. Then that's going to be the objective perspective. But the subjective perspective is that you don't have a definitive entity called customer service because it's constantly changing. Okay. So this this is a very good and long debate about objectivist and subjectivist approaches, but you have to understand when you're doing your research where you stand. So what we mean is it was a Smirich in 1983 who actually noted that objectivists basically tend to view the culture of an organization as something that organization has, a fixed entity. On the other hand, the subjectivist view would be what? It would be that subjectivists say that the culture is something that the organization evolves. Okay, it's continually changing. How it will change? By social enactment. Okay, you interact with your external players and you evolve your reality. So it's about what you have and what you that can be manipulated. What you have that can be manipulated. So have you got something fixed, or have you got something which can be changing? So this is the objectivist and subjectivist. To understand it, you need to go for more examples which you can study of your own. And now we move on to the next thing, what's called as an epistemology. So epistemology, it's an epistome means knowledge, and logy means the derivative mind, or how can we know what we think. So basically epistemology is the study of knowledge. So it is how do we know what is reality. So ontology was about the reality, and epistemology is how do we know that reality. Okay. Epistemology, this is very important because it highlights fundamental questions which have basic implications for how research should proceed. So if you're doing research and you don't know about the epistemology and you don't know about the epistemological stance, then I wonder what you're going to do. So you have to understand epistemology so that you go properly in your research. So epistemology is the science of knowing, okay? and the objective versus subjective debate goes on here also. So we take up in more depth now when we talk about epistemology. So we talk about two extreme stances of epistemology, that is the radical subjectivism and the scientific realism. So epistemology have, two extremes. We just said the scientific realism, or we could say scientific objectivism, or on the other extreme, this is another extreme, which is the radical subjectivism. It's also called as the phenomenology, and this is also called as the positivism. Okay, there are other names for these also. That's why it's confusing, because they have different terminologies related to these two extremes. So in something, if you say the gross way, it is something like a scientist, and phenomenology or subjectivism is like a detective. So you keep these two in a mind, that it's kind of a detective, it is a kind of scientist. So you will come up what scientists do and what detectives do. Now if we talk in terms of research paradigms, because basically we've got two research paradigms, that is the qualitative versus quantitative. Okay, and if we say the radical subjectivism, phenomenology, that is basically the quantitative. And if you talk about the positivism and scientific realism, that's actually, we're talking about qualitative. And if we talk about ontological perspective, which we were discussing previously, then it is about realism. Ontologically it is the realism, and ontologically it is the relativism. So relativism is the ontology within the qualitative paradigm, and there's a little bit of confusion here. Actually this is sorry, where's the pen? This is the quantitative. Okay, and this is the qualitative. Because broadly speaking, we have these two paradigms, research paradigms, and each of these paradigms, qualitative or quantitative, they have their specific ontological perspectives and their and epistemological perspectives. So if we talk about the relativism, okay, and so relativism is the ontology within the qualitative paradigm. This is the qualitative paradigm. Okay, so relativist believes that there are multiple perspectives of reality. So they think there is no single reality, there is the multiple perspectives of reality. Whereas in case of the quantitative or positivist approach, okay, we talk about the ontologically it is the realism. So realism is the ontology within the quantitative paradigm. So what the realists believe is that there is a truth about reality waiting to be discovered. So we have single reality versus multiple reality. So we have on this side no single reality. When we talk about ontological perspective, relativism, because we know that it's gonna change. Like I gave the example of the manager or the customer service. So the reality is not fixed, but here the reality is fixed. We got a single perspective. We got a fixed reality. So we got a fixed stance on reality. Okay, fixed stance on reality. So ontologically we are saying this is the realism, and epistemologically we say it is the positivism on this side. Okay, and in case of phenomenology, which is the qualitative research, We have the ontologically, it is the relativism, and epistemologically, it's gonna be what's called as interpretism. So epistemologically, it is interpretism. So positivism is to say about the epistemological perspective. So because this is say how we actually know about the reality, which we discuss later on also. And in this case, we have what's called as the interpretism. This is the approach, epistemological approach. Epistemologically, this is the interpretism. Okay, and ontologically, it is the relativism. So relativism says that there is no single reality, because ontology talks about the reality, and epistemology talks about how we know about that reality. So interpretism is an approach to know about that reality, and positivism is the approach which is to talk about how to epistemologically how to know about the reality in case of the ontological realism, which says we have a fixed reality, and then we want to know how to know that reality, and that is to be done by the positivist approach. Okay, because when we talk about epistemology, it is the approaches to know. It is to determine the relationship between the researcher and the researched. That's important. It is to determine the relationship between the researcher and the researched. So interpretism is the way to go epistemologically. Because when we talk about the qualitative research, it doesn't believe that reality is fixed. There is no single reality. Okay? But that there are multiple perspectives of reality. They assume that knowledge is maximized by increasing the proximity between the researcher and the researched. That is important. Okay? While in case of the positivism, they think that reality is fixed. We add up another words here, what's called as an Etic versus the Emic. Okay. In case of Etic, it's a researcher's approach that knowledge discovery from an Etic perspective. What we're talking about. This means researcher are in the outside for striving for an objective measure of the topic. Okay, while as an Emic is that of an insider's approach to knowledge. Okay, and here in Etic, knowledge is based on empirical observation. So we have here empirical. What is wrong with the pen? It is the empirical observation. Where here we could say that the knowledge is based on empirical observation, and here we can say the reality or the knowledge is co-constructed. Reality is co-constructed. In the positivism and or post-positivism approaches, knowledge is based on what is said as an empirical observations. Why is this not writing? I don't know. Okay, here's come the pen. We observe a reality that exists beyond ourselves from that external objective reality that knowledge is created. What I mean to say is, for example, let's take an example of sexual discrimination. Say, for example, you're asking people in a company, is there a sexual discrimination? And the respondents may say, no, there is no sexual discrimination. But a researcher, when actually sees the interviews, when a researcher goes into it and in a workplace, analyzes interview applications, successful and successful applicants, promotion to senior posts, and levels of pay, it may uncover a reality, that is the discrimination at institutional level, of which the respondents may be unaware or he may not have considered. So there is a single reality. There's a fixed reality that sexual discrimination is there in a society. Okay. While in case of relativism or interpretism, interpretivism it should be. Okay, in case of interpretivism, knowledge depends on subjective positioning. We interpret reality based on our particular standpoint. Okay, so that's why we said there is no single reality, and it's dynamic, and reality is built. It depends on in the world you live in. It depends on the world you live, and it depends upon your perspective. It depends upon the players which interact, and the reality is not fixed. It changes. While in case of the positivist approach, the reality is fixed. That's why it's very important when we talk about the researches and PhDs and all. You have to figure out where you stand in. Are you here or are you here? Or sometimes you may be lie in between. That is actually the best thing to do. It was actually the Immanuel Kant which actually says a middle way. There should be a middle way of doing the research, which is between the positivism and phenomenology, or between the realism and relativism. We may talk that in detail later. Okay, let's summarize now what we have done so far. Okay, we said we have the ontology and epistemology and axiology are the three basic thematic branches of actually our philosophy. Then we said ontology is nothing but what is the reality, and epistemology is how we know that reality in general. And then we said there are broadly two paradigms. We have scientific realism or objectivism, and we got a radical subjectivism. Okay, we also call it a phenomenology, and we have here what's called as a positivism. Okay, it's a scientific approach because we deal with the objective data. So objective data is something measurable, which you can, that's why we say it's a quantitative research. Okay, for example, we say 75% of the population is addicted to particular thing, something like that, which is the kind of data which you can't deny, which is easy to defend, you can say like that. Okay, but in terms of here, phenomenology is you are behaving like a detective, because you have to actually search for the theory. Okay, we'll see. That's why it's called a qualitative and or relativism or phenomenology. Okay, because we don't have a single reality. The reality is not fixed. In this case, reality is fixed. Okay, and this one is also called as interpretivism. Okay, and this is the realistic paradigm, which is Etic. Okay, and this is the Emic. We discussed that. Now we are going to add more to it. Okay, let me put the pen somewhere. What I'm talking about is this positivism is about explaining. Okay, it is about explaining, and this the phenomenology or interpretivism, okay, is about what is called as understanding. This is about natural sciences, and this is about social sciences. Okay, here we got the objective data, and here we got the subjective data. It is value free Okay, it is value free. And this one is culturally and historically, situated interpretations, we can say like that. Because how your culture and historical perspective will mold the reality. Okay, here we talk about the universal principles and facts. So you have a universal principles and facts, and while on this side of interpretivism, what we have is we have individual interpretations, meanings, motivations, values of social actors, because social actors play a role. Okay, in this case, social actors are independent of the reality. This is the point. Now, if we take an example of some research, say for example, we say the serials of the Indian television leads to divorce. Now, what I'm talking about is this example will give you a proper insight. I'm saying serials in Indian television, on Indian television, leads to divorce. So this is, we already have a theory. That's what we sometimes call as a deductive. It is a deductive, even though we will take up a deductive approach separately. It is a deductive or theory testing. We already have a theory. This is our theory. So we already have a theory that serials, we know that reality is that the serials, the culprits are the serials which lead to the divorce. So this is the positivist approach. We have a theory and we got to test it. That's why we have a deductive approach in case of positivist paradigm. Whereas in this case, if we see in the interpretivist or phenomenologist or whatever you call it, or a qualitative research, we are saying what are the causes of divorce in India. We don't know. We say that there is not a single reality. In this case, we say there's a single reality. It's the serials on the Indian television. Especially in Star Plus here, which have a lot of pangas, and that may lead to the Saas Bahu and all those things that will lead to the divorce. So we have a theory, but in this case, we say that we don't know. There may be the many causes of divorce. And what are those causes? We have to, what's called as a theory building approach or inductive approach. So we have to use what's called as an inductive approach. That basically is our second layer in that research onion, which I talked in the beginning. So it is called inductive approach. This is basically our next question to understand what is the deductive versus inductive. Well, you can see here an example that this is a theory building approach, that you are building a theory. Because you don't have a theory, you have to build it. But in this case, a deductive approach is you have to actually you have a theory and you have to test it. So in deductive approach, what we have is you have already a theory. So you have a theory up front. Okay, you don't have to how you will have a theory, that's also a question. You can develop a theory by the literature review. So that's why literature review is very important in case of positivist approach. So you will extensively do literature review, then you will have some kind of theory. That's something like I said above, the TV or serials leads to the divorce and so on. Then out of that theory, you will have your hypothesis. Okay, you derive your hypothesis from that theory. So from the theory you derive hypothesis, and you make observations. Then you make observations. Okay, you make observations, and then you're gonna confirm it. Okay, but in case of inductive approach, from deductive approach, which is gonna be from a general to specific, you have a general theory here, then you're going more, and you go to the more specific thing. In inductive approach, because you don't know what it is there, you have to observe first. So in inductive approach, what you're gonna do is you are doing your observations to find actually the theory, because you don't know. From the observations you will collect the patterns, and from the patterns you basically have your hypothesis. Okay, it's not writing properly, some problem with the pen. Okay, you find patterns from the observation, then you create hypothesis. You can explore the hypothesis or validate it and so on, and then from that you form a theory out of the hypothesis. Okay, so it's totally different this is a totally different approach. Now moving further, in positivist approach, we're explaining how and why things happen. Okay, we are explaining, this is important, we are explaining why and how. There's a problem with my pen, I don't know what has happened to it. We're explaining how and why things happen, so we got to do measurements. Okay, we got to do correlations, we got to make statistical logic. Just read it, I don't know it's not writing properly. We got to do verifications. Okay, and the typical methods which we're gonna use is typical methods. If we say what we're gonna use is like a survey, we're gonna use questionnaires, N-N-A-R-I-E-S. Okay, we're gonna use random sampling, etc. Okay, but if we say interpretivism, okay, then we are not saying explaining, we are basically here, where is my pen, here is it, we are not explaining, we are understanding. This is the difference. Okay, how and why we are understanding that, how and why things happen. So you are doing what? You're elucidating data. So you have to elucidating the data, the meaning, etc. Okay, what are the typical approaches are like? We will use ethnographic study, we will use ethnographical study. Okay, we may use in-depth interviews because we have to elucidate the data. Okay, in-depth interviews, we don't have a reality, we have to see what the reality is. We got analytical approaches. Okay, and this is the kind of difference between the two. I think this is a heck of differences, and with these extremes are pretty clear, I guess. Now maybe we may need more examples. Let me give a few examples and then wind it up. Like I say, watching violence on television encourage juvenile violence. So this is gonna be the positivist approach, because I am saying that violence on television, I have already a theory. And okay, like I said, this is the deductive approach. I have a theory already, and I want to test it and the theory. Okay, like here we already have a theory now, because we have a watching violence on television, so we already know it is gonna be, so we have to observe and confirm it. But in case of the interpretivist approach, what will be? We have to find the things. What we may say, what are the causes of juvenile violence? And we don't know, it may be the violence on television, or it may be something else. In here we may have smoking kills, for example. Okay, we already know the smoking kills. I would say death rate of in particular state ABC is increased because of smoking. We already know it. But in case of interpretivist, what do you say? What is the cause of increased death rate? Okay, so in this case we have some universal truths, and in this case we have to see the pattern, we have to observe the things, and then we can lead to our theory. Does it make sense or not? I think that is it. It's pretty covered. Okay then, until next time, it's masalama.